much for organizing. Yeah, Tanya runs a Theraphi in Somerset West, and she arranged for you to come here. I don't know how many of you know her and how many of you were at the last talk. Were any of you at the last talk? Okay, cool. You need to hear it again, I suppose. So I'm Claire Yanish. I started Theraphi South Africa because I'm a friend of one of the inventors, which is Dan Winter, and because I deeply appreciate his genius and his technology and what its benefits are for not just you who's in the technology and experiencing it for yourself, but I think it has big impacts on the space around it. So please come in. No, really, I've only just begun. Yeah, I want to start by saying I'm not in the medical field. I have studied quite a lot of alternative medicine, but I'm actually trained as a chemical engineer, and my master's was in clean technologies, that how to clean up what engineers do. And I'm now have another master's in biomimicry, which is to copy nature to invent new technologies. So we do everything from mimic spider webs to make new advanced materials, to understanding how forests work to reinvent the economy, to mimic circular economies. And I'm speaking at a conference tomorrow on the future of water in Cape Town. So this is not my main field. However, biomimicry is my main field, and this is a biomimicry technology. So if you have questions around health and healing, I'm not a specialist in that. But if you have questions around how life works and how to make the optimum space for your life to flourish, then I have the answers to that question. All right. So that's really where I'm coming from. So don't expect me to answer deep medical questions or even how to make your skin look more magnificent or anything, but I'll definitely give you a big insight to this technology. So this is my friend Dan Winter. He's an extraordinary man. He's been involved in extraordinary science for a long time, and he's invented quite a few technologies. One of them is a thing called an imploder, which you put on your tap or your spray nozzle, and it makes your plants grow way more abundantly, and it's related to the similar technology. But his friend Paul Harris from Canada, so Dan is based in France, his friend Paul Harris from Canada has been building things like Tesla coils and Rife machines. He's a good technical, practical guy. Decided to work with Dan Winter to help him turn this into something beyond just working with plants, into something that could work with people as well. And that was the invention of the Theraphi. This is from our website. The main purpose of it is to help you relax. That is the fundamental thing that it does. It gets you to a state where you can deeply relax. But while in that state of relaxation, your body can naturally set up its own way of repairing yourself and helping you to regenerate. There's another piece of it which helps you to recharge. It's like a human battery charger, and we'll explain that as well. Many people come here to Theraphi for different reasons, mainly to reduce stress, deal with anxiety. The one in Cape Town has been used for trials on ADD and ADHD specifically. Very significant results there. Around improving your concentration, your focus, and your meditation. Because it is a very strong implosive force field, it's used to reduce inflammation, which is strongly related to pain. And because there's pulsed EMFs, it's also used for pain. Mostly it helps your body get to its own state to heal, enhance its own healing, and it has a really great benefit to your immune system. The other benefits about enhancing cell regeneration and metabolism, there's strong physics behind it, and there's some results behind that too. But mostly it's working on a level of harmonics and coherence. So most of us in a state of stress or in a state of incoherence. Incoherence, so it's about helping your body to reach a state of coherence, which is the harmony. And then restoring your body to a natural state of bliss. It's an extraordinary thing to think about, but most of us are actually seeking that state of bliss, that state of peace, that state of connection to everything. And we seek it through everything from drugs to alcohol to all day at a spa to whatever it is. And if you actually knew how to find it by getting to center, by getting to a state of peace, you would realize that actually that natural state of bliss is within reach of all of us. Structuring your water for improved hydration, that's an enhancement of what his original invention was. And enhancing plant growth, it's a lot to do with the plasma technologies behind it. So how do you experience the Theraphi? Mostly you get to lie down between two beams of plasma light, which have a pulsing frequency through it, and a Tesla coil which increases the voltage. And I'll explain why all of those things. But technically it's like going to somewhere where you'd lie down and have an energy treatment of some kind, similar to lying in UV lights or infrared lights, but in the end you have a different result than what an infrared or UV light would do. There's 4 key components of the Theraphi. You have the 5 frequencies, which is why it's called Theraphi. and phi is the Greek term for the golden ratio, and I explained that one just now. It has pulsed EMF, which is electromagnetic frequencies, which is very well known and used in many cases, but I'll give you an example of that just now. The plasma tubes is what you see there, those specific tubes that are shaped with very interesting geometries. Have got a plasma in them, and then you have the Tesla coil. So I'm going to begin with the Tesla coil because Tesla is one of my favorite people. It's not Elon Musk's name of his company I'm talking about. It's the man who invented the Tesla coil, Mr. Tesla himself. A Tesla coil increases the voltage without increasing the current. So if you were to go into a space where the voltage was quite high and the current was quite low, you would actually not get shocked with electric current. So people used to hang around Tesla's laboratory as he played with these amazing Tesla coils, making these plasma tubes, and they started to feel really great. They felt like they were supercharged, feeling awesome, and this was like a long time ago. So people were investigating and curious as to why this was happening, and as a result, a lot of people started playing with electricity to help people feel good. And I mean, there's a heck of a lot of history in electrical medicine, and it's really fascinating. But more recently, been very much basically proven through Robert Becker, MD's work in his book, The Body Electric, how your body is actually fundamentally electric, and the work of Dr. Jerry Tennant, realizing that a lot of the issues with cell health is related to the voltage of the cell. So I really simplify it. Healthy cells have a specific watt or voltage, and cancerous or very diseased cells have very low voltage. And there's a whole lot of research on how you can actually match the voltage to your health, and people who go through some kind of electrotherapy with voltage rather than with current can actually increase their cell battery charge, is what we call it. It's a very summarized way of explaining it, but the main thinking there is pH is related to voltage. So a potential hydrogen is actually a potential of voltage, and we all know that if your body's more alkaline, it's less likely you'll get sick. If your body gets more acid, it's more likely that you get sick. So if you understand that side, it's very similar in terms of cell voltage. It's a potential of your cells to do the work they have to do. If they've got a good potential, they do it well. If it's low potential, they don't do it so well. So main thing, if you had no other benefit of the Theraphi, you go in there, you have a line in the frequency space that also has a high voltage. It recharges your cells. From the results perspective, that helps you with managing your immune system. If you, for example, my son's got a cold right now. If I put him in there for 3 minutes, I take him out, his immune system responds really well, and he tends to get healthy a lot faster. That kind of idea is very good for immune system, very good for cell health in general. In the very long time ago, when they were working with the priori version of this technology, the very high voltage helped the body withstand illness so well that if they took rabbits with sleeping sickness and they put them in the high voltage experience, the rabbits would live way longer than they should. But if they took the blood out of those rabbits and put it in other rabbits, those rabbits would die. So in other words, the disease was in the body, but the body responded so well to it. So you can read up a lot more about electrical history of Theraphi through those books like Healing is Voltage, The Body Electric. And then there's another one about pulsed electromagnetic fields, which I'll get to now. But you can just see we are all electrical creatures floating in the electric sea of the electric universe. Just the shape in which electricity moves, the shape in which water moves, the structure in which things grow, there's very much an electrical evidence to it. And it's a lot to do with the plasma universe and electric universe cosmologies of our world. And it's getting really a lot of traction at the moment because it makes much more sense than many of our others. So without the physics, it's simply a whole body recharge, right? You get that part? Done. Then there's another part of it, is it's not just voltage on and it stays on, and it's not just frequencies on and it stays on. The frequencies are turned on and off in a pulse, okay? Just like your body has a pulse going through it, right? Pulses are related to life forces, and you've really found them. You'll find it in the way that the rhythms of the earth moves, the rhythms of the day, the rhythms of the season, even in the things like the Schumann resonance of the earth. If you want to know more, you can read tons about how it's been used for many, many decades for dealing with pain specifically, various significant benefits there. But where it's most used is people like the astronauts in space for NASA they get sent off into space. They've got no connection to the rhythms and the pulses of life, right? So they basically deliberately create a pulsed EMF experience for them in the spaceship so that they end up not losing this important rhythm that's essential for their life. Now, if we're wearing shoes all day long in metal buildings and metal structures that are high off the ground, for example, you start to lose that connection. Even if your home is on the ground, if you work in high-rise buildings, you have that disconnection. And so often people find that if they just restore that pulsed effect in their system, their body responds well and they start to get better. So a lot of dis-ease and a lot of stress is also related to not being grounded, not being connected to these pulses. There's a great short video I'm just going to play referring to how we know we need food, water, sunshine, and oxygen, but we've forgotten about this essential element, which is the pulsed EMFs.
Oxygen are essential for life, but there's a fifth element of health that most people don't know is essential, and that is the Earth's PEMFs, or pulsed electromagnetic fields, which is both the Schumann and the geomagnetic field, which is the magnetic field of the Earth. These frequencies and energies are so essential that NASA and the Russian space program actually equipped their spacecrafts with Schumann generators and magnetic field generators. So we need these frequencies, we need these energies for the body's circadian rhythms, energy production, and even to keep a pain-free body, which I'll explain later.
So you can watch that video, just look up pulsed EMFs on videos on YouTube, you can find it in depth. So those are just like side benefits of the Theraphi. The two main parts of the Theraphi is the plasma tubes and the 5 frequencies, but they added those other 2 features because they had to use a voltage of some kind and they had to pulse it, so they might as well connect it to those other 2 benefits, right? So plasma tubes, what is a plasma? People often don't know, but they've heard about their plasma television. Do you have a plasma TV, anyone? All that it means is inside the tube there's a gas that's been lit either by electricity or fire, in this case electricity, where the electrons are allowed to move freely. Okay, so then now it becomes like an ionized gas where there's the central proton and then the free moving electron behaves completely differently than a normal gas will. And it's actually got a lot of properties very similar to the bioactive field, the field around your body that people know about now. So plasma is basically, instead of having each molecule an electron with the proton together, the protons are free from the electrons and behaves very interestingly. So plasma is being used very interestingly now in a thing called plasma activated water. And you can watch this TEDx talk by Paul Leandis at TEDx Arnhem, how researchers at his university are using water that's been activated by plasma to enhance growth of plants, because the Dutch are very interested in growing plants. But it's really based on the idea that whenever there's a lightning storm, seeds and seedlings tend to grow a lot better than when there isn't one. And there was a lot of curiosity as what actually happened, and the ionization has an effect on the water, and it's really great for the water, and it makes the plants grow more effectively. So you can look up research by the UK universities, by the Dutch universities, and they call it POR, plasma activated water. So what's interesting in this thing is that the Theraphi was not essentially created to treat plants, but we used it as an experiment, and we have a school at our farm where we have a Theraphi, and we got the kids to do some experiments as part of the class, where we put normal organic seeds in with spring water in organic soil, and you'll see that this one is just an ordinary seed planted in organic soil with spring water. This one, the water was treated with plasma. So we basically put a thing of water inside the Theraphi, and we turned it on for 10 minutes, we turned it off. We just used the water. You can see it sprouted faster than that one. This one, we just put the seed in the system, and we left it in for the same amount of 10 minutes, and we turned it on, and basically we put it in, we planted it. So in all the cases where we did this, the one where the seed was activated grew basically sprouted more quickly, and that's also well known that you can take seeds and they'll sprout more quickly after a lightning storm as well. So there's carrots, you can see the normal one, the water only in the middle, and the plasma seeds on the right. And now we have one in doing proper trials. There's a Theraphi in Swaziland, where the one owner is a grower of tea tree oil and rose geranium, and she's now treating all of her plants before she transplants them and grows them on a big scale, and using it, and it's having very significant growing benefits on her thing. So just on its own, if you never used it for your own self, the benefit to plant growth is quite significant. Then there's a lot of research now in terms of using plasma for medical treatment. This guy, Anthony Holland, talks about using plasma and frequency to treat cancer cells with great success. And then if you read the plasma medicine book, there's a lot of applications for just using plasma for cell regeneration, for a heck of a lot of other stuff. And since I'm not a medical practitioner, I don't want to get into depth, but just giving you a hint that plasma's got benefits to it, right? What plasma are they using in the Theraphi? They're specifically choosing noble gases. So that's helium, neon, argon, krypton, and xenon. So if you put those in the right mix in your Theraphi globes, they come out as that slightly pinkish, purplish orange, and sometimes it's more orange, and sometimes it's more purple, and sometimes it's more pink. It just is the mix of gas and how much ionization has happened. Now what's interesting about the noble gases is they're the most non-reactive gases. They're the most stable gases. And trust me, I spent a lot of time studying this periodic table. If you do chemical engineering, you know a lot about it. But what I've read about in the last 15 years, so I finished my chemical engineering master's almost 20-something years ago. And then about 15 years ago, I learned about how each of the elements in the periodic table actually repeat in octaves. And if you look at the patterns in which we order them, we're actually ordering them like this. We don't get to see how they actually work. And if you order them in this kind of thing, where the central ones with the noble gases, the non-reactive gases, and as you move them further away the spiral, they became more reactive. You'll see the octaves repeating, but essentially it's like the same way as a tornado would move, with a calm eye in the middle and these reactive systems on the edge. All that means is that these ones have a closed electron outer shell, which means it's completely complete, just not looking for any other things to make a balance with. But in another level, you can turn all of those specific frequencies of those octaves into specific geometries. And a lot of work's being done by some guy called Walter Russell, where he matches each one of the elements to a geometry and to a frequency, and he gets it 100% right. This is in the early 1900s, and he recognizes that there's a few elements that must be missing, which were later discovered 20 to 30 years later, which he was absolutely accurate with, just by the properties of frequency and geometry that those elements would have. So I'm not going into why they have it, just that they have it. What's interesting about the noble gases is they all have the perfect dodecahedron geometry, which is even if you don't know anything about it, it's the one which exhibits the phi geometry in every single aspect of it. So it sounds really kooky and weird, and I'm talking to you from a chemical engineering perspective. It is 100% more accurate than most of the chemistry we learn. It's extraordinary in how it describes things. But if you were going to turn any gas on which you wanted to have a noble gas, if you had a noble gas to turn on into a plasma, it's going to have really beneficial effects because it's got that extraordinary coherent harmonic to it as you turn it on. So I'm going to play with the word coherence and harmonics a lot today, but particularly if you want a plasma that's going to do good stuff for you, use a noble gas. So you can see you've got these two plasma lights that you're lying in the middle, and they set up a specific frequency because there's 3 electrodes on the back of these tubes, and as they turn on, they spin the ionic gas into a spiral, and they meet in the center. So that's the beginning of it, right? So now you have the plasma tubes, you have the Tesla coil, and you have the pulse. The last part is the 5 frequencies. Why have they used the golden ratio of frequencies? And what's that about, okay? So there's this wonderful quote from the Greeks that harmony makes things grow and lack of it makes them decay. If you were to hang out all day, every day in the lush and beautiful forest, or lie on a beach all day long, if you're in the beautiful harmonics of nature, it's why people buy CDs of sounds of nature playing, right? So the harmonics that we're listening to actually has such a deep and calming piece on us that it has really beneficial effects, right? Now, we don't actually do that all day, every day. We hang out in places like this, right? Not the Somerset Westians of us, but the majority of the world. And that's got no harmonics on it. It's actually got extraordinary amounts of challenges here. It's got total disharmony, not only in the structure of this space, but it's also got total disharmony in the noises that are coming from this space. And then you've got metals that are the exact opposite of what the Theraphi does. It actually charge suckers. Metal actually sucks charge from you. If you spend all day holding your phone or on your computer, you're actually sucking charge from your cells instead of adding charge to yourself. So you've got all this mixed stuff, no harmonics, no coherence, and sucking your charge. So how do you actually replenish? Well, in short of going back to nature, you go back to nature's frequencies and nature's geometries. Most of the magnificent music that we love to hear has got these specific geometries to them. But one thing I know from studying nature now consistently for 10 years in my biomimicry profession is that geometry is everywhere. Okay, you can just, everywhere you look, you see geometry. And the other thing I know is that wherever there is matter, there is geometry. Even in chemistry, if you study how chemicals actually interact with each other, it's got everything to do with geometry as much as it has got to do with charge. So one of the quotes from Egypt is matter is equal to frozen music, actually. And if you looked at that, frequencies create geometry, geometry creates frequencies. Perhaps the things that we're seeing is actually just movement or frequency that's in a harmonic interference pattern creating the geometries that we see. And it turns out that's 100% accurate. And you can actually look at everything from the solar system to atoms to DNA, and they've got very specific geometries and very specific frequencies to it. So the Theraphi plays with not only that the phi frequency is a geometry, but it's also a frequency. Okay, so just can you start to see the thing? If you play a sound, it's got a geometry to it. If you have geometry, it's got a sound or a frequency to it. And it's just the way that the interference pattern happens with the sound. And it's also got a lot to do with fractals, this section, because fractals are parts that repeat at different scales, but they repeat at different scales because they basically are the same pattern at different scales. So if you have a pattern that repeats at different scales, and it's the same pattern that repeats at different scales, it tends to fit well within the other one. Okay? So just think about it. If you had a sound that fitted well within another sound, it's what we call things like an orchestra, right? This sound and this sound plays a harmonic tone. You can fit well. So if you have two sounds that are making harmonic, you can imagine you can have geometries that make harmonics. They're actually coherent. They fit within each other. We typically talk about fractals as parts that repeat at every single scale. If you zoom in, you see the same pattern. If you zoom out, you see the same pattern. And fractals are evident everywhere in nature. In fact, you cannot find anything in nature without fractals. And when we try and do patterns on the computer that mimic nature, they tend to be based on fractal geometry. So the two major fractals that we're interested here are the branching fractal and the spiraling fractal. These are the most obvious ones that you see, and they actually are related. Essentially, if you left a tree to grow without any interference whatsoever, or if you left a plant to grow without any interference of the sun or the wind or the shade or whatever, it should just grow perfectly straight in the specific branching system. So it starts with 1, then it splits to 2, then it splits to 3, then it splits to 5, then it splits to 8, it splits to 13. I don't know if you know this, but that's called the Fibonacci sequence. You heard of that before? But basically, add 2 and 1 together, you get 3. Add 3 and 2 together, you get 5. Add 5 and 3 together, you get 8. So it's actually each number is the sum of the 2 preceding numbers. Now, if you take those numbers and you make squares of those sizes, so you take a 1-sided square and then a 2-sided square and then a 3-sided, each one is 3 units long and 5 units long, and you put them, so 3 and 5 make 8, 2 and 3 make 5. Can you see that there? And you actually put them all around like that. If you join the centers like that, you end up creating a harmonic spiral known as the golden spiral or the golden ratio. You also get it by dividing the small part by the large part. Is exactly the same ratio as the large part by the small. Now, this is studied in art. It's studied in geometry. Everybody knows about it. You'll know that it's in your body. You'll know that it's everywhere. The question is, from my perspective, is why, all right? Everything I know about nature is that if it's got a specific shape or a form, it's perfectly related to a function that it has, and it won't waste itself on form without having a function of benefit to it. So this fascinated Dan Winter for a long time, and he spent a lot of time researching it. And eventually he worked out that there's an equation that describes nature, which is this one, which is his famous equation. And he says if you take the smallest length that there is, and trust me if you don't know why, it's just trust that it is, that the Planck length is the smallest length that you can possibly get in our solid physical universe, or you take the Planck time, right? But I just keep it with the Planck length, and you times that, or multiply that by the golden ratio, which is called phi, you will get a frequency. Okay? If you times that by golden ratio to the power of 1, golden ratio to the power of 2, to the power of 3, to the power of 4, to a whole integer number, not by any other number whatsoever, just a whole integer. So it's not 1.1 or 1.2. So basically, if you times the smallest possible time or distance by the golden ratio, you can do it again and again and again, times by once, times by twice, to 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, which is what that actually is to the power of that. You end up getting all the frequencies, all the links in nature that are totally related to supporting life. So you get the 2 frequencies of photosynthesis, you get exactly the Schumann resonances or the harmonics of the earth, you get the brainwave frequencies, you get perception or bliss, you get the ATP frequencies of the cells, which is the frequencies that keep cells going. You get the heart rate variabilities that's essential at your low frequency and high frequencies. You get the exact duration of the earth here, you get the exact frequencies of the previous versions of the machines that have been involved in healing, and you get the exact frequencies that they use in the Theraphi. So he's related this to an extraordinary graph, and you can see how it matches perfectly. And this is, I don't know if you know this, but this is probably the most important equation that anyone could possibly have discovered. And I know it seems so simple and so obvious, and cheap as why not? But if you get the profound meaning of this, hopefully you will by the end of this talk. But just this one equation made us realize that the golden ratio is absolutely fundamental to life-supporting frequencies, right? I'll explain why a bit further. But it's also fundamental to things like the radius of hydrogen and the specific geometries that we see. So we know that nature's geometries have harmonics to them. We know that they're fractal. We now know that all of those fractals have golden ratio relations to them, which means if nature wants to create a harmonic that is coherent and life-supporting, it'll put the golden ratio into it. And there's a reason why. Okay. Here's another one where he relates it to the craniosacral frequencies, and he basically takes those same frequencies and shows how they increase like this. So remember how I showed you the spiral starts with 1, then it goes to 2, then it goes to 3, then it goes to 5? That's the kind of ratio that it has. And you put these, if you actually mark these frequencies, they match exactly. So Schumann resonance of the earth, exactly that frequency, brainwave and alpha, and then he's got a couple of other ones that are really interesting, related to the craniosacral fluid. So I don't know if you know, but your craniosacral fluid is the fluid that moves from your cranium to your sacrum, up and down your spine, otherwise known as your spinal fluid. And a lot of craniosacral practitioners work with holding your spine and feeling the pulse and the rhythms in your spine. And if the pulse is in the right flow, you tend to be in a good state of health, or your parasympathetic nervous system activates, which is your calming system. And he's worked out the exact frequencies that are the low tide and the high mid tide and the high tide in craniosacral therapy exactly match this equation as well, right? So definitely the body wants this frequency for one of the most fundamentally important things, which is your spinal fluid frequency, the pulse in which it moves in your body. And that if you do have the moment where your pulse reaches these specific tides that you want to activate, it activates your natural rhythms of your mind and body, balances you to your deep calm state. Okay, so starting point is power ratio essential to life, essential for geometries and coherence, and we definitely find it in one of the most important things, which is in our spinal fluid. And we also know the spinal fluid is known as the kundalini. I don't know if you know that. It's always represented as this kind of caduceus shape, which is actually, for some strange coincidence, the same shape that the medical profession uses on their side for healing, so for health and medicine. What do they know that we don't know, which is important there. But anyway, the main thing about this is that definitely this caduceus shape is essential for life in nature, and is vitally important for not only the actual physical frequencies of your craniosacral fluid, but in a lot of the other healing modalities around kundalini and around your chakras also refer to this very specific thing as well. So that's really how this starts to link to health, right? We know that if you spend a lot of time in nature, you start to feel balanced, you start to feel calm. In fact, they put pictures like this up in prisons, and people start treating each other better in the prison. You know, they'll put pictures like this in your office, and you'll start working better. If it was mine, I would not work at all. I'd probably just stop working. But the point is that we know this thing called biophilia, that we have this love for nature, that if we hang around it, if we even see pictures of it, it has a calming effect on our body. Essentially, the human body is in resonance with the living mathematics of nature. If you see the geometries in which the body is shaped in, golden ratio related, you see the geometries in which nature is in, you see that's golden ratio related, you find that they're harmonic and they're fractal and they fit within each other. So we find if Our natural calm state of being are related to golden ratio. Schumann resonance of the earth is related to golden ratio. And you hang out in nature, you find you have this resonance effect, you start to feel connected. So quite literally, the same flow forms that form the pine cone are the same flow forms that form the heart. And it's very much the same shape that you see from above. You see, that's the shape of your heartbeat from the side. There, this is the shape of your heartbeat. If you look at it from the top, or the donut top, reconstruct. So it'll always just increase and increase and increase. It'll be a reinforcing feedback loop that will sustain itself, which is kind of what you want your heart to do. You want your heart to beat in a way that makes it feel like it's getting supported in every single beat. So this is where the biomimicry link came in for me, because there's this amazing biomimicry technology called the PAC study, which is also golden ratio related. So there's a golden ratio dimension this way and in that way. And if you spin this in a thing of water, this is one of the versions that they have, you start to spin that, it generates a flow form in this tank of water where that's 10 million gallons of water. This thing is only 10 centimeters tall, the one that's in here. It uses only 3 light bulbs equivalent of electricity to start to stir. It starts to spin, creates this beautiful donut torus shape there, and the nearest competitor is that size. But it's so good at keeping this water well mixed that it will keep turning. Even if you turn off this lily and stopped it from turning, the whole system keeps stirring for 4 hours afterwards. So it's definitely showing you that this particular shape, if you just started to spin it on its own, might create a vortex, but if you have it in the golden ratio, it spins it even more effectively, right? So wouldn't it be great if we could get our heart into a state where it actually has this reinforcing feedback loop that helps to center you, calm you, and helps to get you into a state of vibrant health. So this is the image of your big beats and your little beats of your heart, right? You have a heart rate that's big beats and a little beat. When you are in a state of peace, calm, or love, the heart rate ratio of the big one to the little one is exactly golden ratio related. Okay, so you want to get your 2 beats moving in that golden ratio pulse, because when you feel the state of peace, of bliss, of love, which is a got a reinforcing magnetic field effect around it. Okay, so you can see that there. And here's another interesting thing, that the frequency of love that everyone refers to, which is the 528 hertz, if you actually play that frequency and you see the frequency vibration that creates in water when you make a sinus curve, it looks exactly like the same shape as the pine cone, the same flow rates that you do. So this is the field of sacred geometry, and people love it and they talk about it for ages. All you have to do is Google 528 hertz and you'll find open your heart chakra, feel the frequency of love, and start to make sense of what that's all about there, right? But that's not the only thing. It also has an interesting effect on your brain. So first thing I want to say is when you lie in the Theraphi, it starts to play the exact resonant frequency of your heart rate when it's in a deep peace, calm, or love state. And so it resonates your body to that frequency. That's the first thing, just your heart. But it also works at the level of your brain. This is the work of the Resonance Project, Resonance Foundation, the 5 double spiral field balanced polarity of the brain. A 5 double spiral creates a balanced polarity field, and the double torus is the 3D manifestation of that field pattern. Our brains are a perfectly designed torus structure that resonates with the structure of space-time. So isn't that extraordinary in itself? But essentially, when your brain is in that coherent hemisync state where both stars are working together, it creates a torus field around it, which if it's in that alpha frequency or theta frequency that the Theraphi is, it creates that perfectly balanced state that makes you feel like you're in the zone. You know what I mean? The other thing that it helps you to get in is just into an alpha state or a theta state, which is a calming state. So there's different levels of your brain waves. Beta is when you're awake, normal, alert, and conscious. Alpha is when you're relaxed, calm, in a state of meditation, creative visualization. Theta is when you're deeper, and delta is when you're very in a deep dreamless sleep. So there's a man called Dr. Joe Dispenza who's just written a new book called Becoming Supernatural. And he's written in there, you display alpha brain waves when you are relaxed, calm, creative, intuitive, when no longer thinking, analyzing, when daydreaming, when imagining, like in a trance state. It's when your attention turns in on your inner world. So at a very basic level, you've got your frequencies coming through the Theraphi that are helping you to tune to alpha, theta, and delta. It helps you not only relax and calm, but turns you inside to inner world. Then, when you slow down your brain waves to this state, it activates your limbic brain, which connects to your subconscious operating systems. This then steps in to begin to heal your body. So if you get your body into a deep relaxed state of calm in your heart, deep relaxed state of calm in your brain. It's not surprising your body takes over and does its job, which is exactly what's happening when you're in the space with the Theraphi. It's something as simple as moving into this elevated state of joy, calm, peace, inspiration, or gratitude for 5 to 10 minutes a day can produce significant epigenetic changes in your healthful body. So epigenetic means there's a genetic influence on your body, or the genes start expressing themselves differently just by moving into a more coherent state. So a lot of work by places like the Heart Math Institute, just simply trying to get you from a state of anxiety and stress just to a state of coherent emotion, just because it'll have a benefit to yourself and to your health of your body. A lot of research done on that. But if you actually could get into a space which deliberately resonated the frequencies that got your heart rate to that state and your brainwave to that state, not only that, but it's also pulsing the same frequency as the Schumann resonance of the earth, which helps you connect to that, which also pulses the same frequency of your craniosacral fluid, which helps that resonance to that, and all of those are in the same thing, stacked together through the Theraphi frequencies. You can imagine what benefit that might have to the state of your health, and that many people talk about health being ease, the opposite of dis-ease, right? And how stress affects the body is quite well known. Have any of you seen the film The Heal documentary? No. I'll just play a short trailer for it. It summarizes this up more than anything else I could say. Mission, or people who got better from it, is that the X were related to calming, de-stressing, getting out of your incoherent emotions to coherent emotions. One was about changing your diet, and most of the diet changes was moving to more alkaline diets, which is exactly the similar thing about, as I was saying in the beginning, is alkalinizing the body, which is also a pH voltage related thing. So this is the work of the Heart Math Institute that really done a lot of work around how positive emotions can increase the brain's ability to make good decisions, helps you boost the immune system, creates physiological benefits in your body. And they do a lot of work, even in hospitals around the world, and helping to get people to get into that coherent emotion state to help them heal. And there's a lot of work around it. It's not that you good or bad emotions, not trying to have a happy thought or a positive thought. It's having a coherent thought, right? Having a coherent emotion, which is a harmonic, is very important as opposed to an incoherent or noisy type of thought or emotion. And if you do go into that state, it increases your parasympathetic dominance. So the very basic level, it's repeating the same point that I said in the beginning. If you get into a state of calm, get into a state of peace, get into a state of coherence, you can get into a state of parasympathetic dominance, which is when your body takes over and does its good job of healing itself. So we know that music creates order out of chaos. There's this lovely quote by Yuhidi Menuhin. Music creates order out of chaos. A confusion surrenders to order and noise to music. We attain a greater universal order which rests upon fundamental relationships of geometrical and mathematical proportion. So essentially, when you play really good, calm, relaxing, healing music to your body, it does make you feel better, literally, emotionally even, not only physically. There's a lot of work by the Simoscope and Cymatics people to show that if you play different sounds through a solid, you can actually see the shapes that are formed are very much harmonics that are geometries that are related to the harmonics, and they're all very much fractals as well. Really beautiful shapes. So when music has harmonics to it, it creates geometries that are related to life. When music does not have harmonics, it does not. So look at these exquisite, this is each of the piano notes that you can see here being played through a Simoscope, which is pretty much a liquid structure that you allow to vibrate to that tone until it creates a vibration, then you take a photograph of the light behind it, and those are the shapes that it creates. So we do know that geometry and music, geometry and frequencies, harmonics and frequencies are related. Now this is really one of the most fascinating things I've come across. The woman Eileen Day McCusick came to speak at the Ubuntu Fest in Nelspruit at the end of April, which I was also speaking at. And she has taken 10 years where she's been playing with tuning forks around the human biofield and using that to help lead to some kind of healing in that person. So she takes a tuning fork and she plays it, and somewhere around your biofield she'll pick up if something's out. Like the tuning fork should just normally vibrate, but if it starts to get like a little deep tone or a slightly tweaked tone, she knows something's out. After 10 years of doing this, she's worked out that everybody's biofield holds the memory of their lives in it, which is really fascinating in itself. And if the year that you were born is sort of there at the end of your biofield, the year that you currently are now, say if you're 60 years old, this is where you are now, halfway between is when you were 30. And she can take the tuning fork and anywhere along that she can say, oh, there's a very strong static when you were 3? What happened when you were 3? And she can play it at 10. And then she keeps putting the tuning fork into that biofield and starts playing a harmonic until it becomes more coherent. It starts affecting the biology of that human. So they start getting better from problems that were related. And she's done it for so long now that she's almost like a dolphin. She can actually see what's physically wrong with the human person that she's working with in her mind when she's playing the tone now. And she can put it over your spine and she can say, well, C3 is out slightly by X number of degrees, and I'll go and check, and the chiropractor says it actually be correct, it was out. So she's become extremely brilliant at this. What she says is if you can persistently expose your biofield, which is your memory, to coherent music or coherent sound, it'll slowly tune the biofield that you're in into a more coherent space, which will help relieve some of the stress and trauma, which creates sort of dull tones or tweaked tones in your music that your body is playing. So that's a summary of what she's saying. But essentially, she's one of the most extraordinary people I've met. She's in her 50s and she's got the most beautiful toned muscles. Almost like she looks like she's done yoga or gym every day of her life, and she hasn't. She just literally tones her muscles with her tuning forks. And slowly over time, over many, many years, she's actually got her body to be at peak physical position, and many of her wrinkles have actually disappeared from her constantly working with the tuning fork around her skin and her body. And she's not obsessed with this stuff. It's just her teenage son asked her one day, if you're so good at healing, why are you looking so old? And it made her obsessed about figuring out how she could solve this problem. And she literally has. And if you see some videos of her talking, you know, a year ago versus now, she looks like she's been sculpted in marble between then and now. What I love about this is that all she's doing is the human one-on-one physical version of what the Theraphi actually can do as well. But obviously this is consistent, which is every single day on this side. But the idea that sound or tone has an impact on your body so much that it can actually physically tone your muscles is so profound. I mean, seriously, it should be taught at school. It really is. And why do we call it toning the muscles in the first place? And so we've been talking to her recently. She ran a course in South Africa when she was here. She did a talking and she ran a course. And one of my friends has been in that course, and I only catch up with her this weekend and learn as much as I can. But the idea is that it's coherent sound generates coherent fields in your biofield that is actually your memory field, and that your cells then pick up that field. So let's look at this. A harmonized, coherent biofield makes us less prone to disease, stuckness, knee-jerk reactions, having our buttons pushed, self-limiting beliefs, and an overbusy mind, depression, and disconnectedness. It allows us to be quiet inside and in harmony with the earth and the universe, which is almost exactly what I've been telling you in a completely different term. And she talks about how important it is to work as much with the human biofield as with the physicality of the body. And she says what the microtubules on your body do, which is well backed up by science now, is they actually are little antennas in each of your cells, and they pick up the frequency of your biofield, and they give the cells instructions for what the DNA is going to do in that body. So really important studies by Stuart Hammerhoff, and he's an elite statist about how the microtubules are actually fundamentally involved in where consciousness enters the body. And a lot of research on how the microtubules actually follow specific golden ratio geometries. Now if you imagine if your frequency was in golden ratio, those microtubules, perfect like tuning forks, pick up those frequencies and can activate a good sequence of processes. But if they're out, you're going to have a bit of a problem that emerges. So that's microtubules related to the golden ratio. You can look that up as well. And then you have your DNA, which we all know from a lot of research now has definitely got golden ratio relation to it. And you can study that up to your elbows deep in it. This is actually literally the photograph of what DNA spirals look like. There's like a 5-sided and then another 5-sided, and the overlay looks like a 10-sided figure. So what Dan Winter said a long time ago, if you watch his video from when he's looking about 20 years younger, is that when your breathing rate, your heart rate, your craniosacral fluid, your brain waves are all in golden ratio. Imagine a sound that you put another sound on top of it and another sound on top of it, like an orchestra. They have to be in harmonics, otherwise they interfere in a way that actually causes destruction between. The only ratio that allows you to perfectly stack thousands of frequencies upon each other without them interfering with each other, with them only supporting each other, is the golden ratio. So you can imagine if you got into a deep state of meditation with your brain, your heart is feeling deeper relaxed, your craniosacral fluid was nice, your breathing rate is calm, and they all actually get into that golden ratio frequency related thing. So this might be the Planck constant times the golden ratio to the frequency of 20, and that might be the Planck constant to the golden ratio to the power of 10, and that might be to the power of 5. But each one of them is just another step down from that same equation. It enables them to not only stack perfectly without interfering with each other, but they support each other. So your body feels like it's in the zone, like it's calm, like it's centered, like it's connected. And it's connected to the Schumann resonance of the earth. And you're connected to yourself inside. You just suddenly feel the state of natural bliss, which is actually what we're all trying to achieve in much of our daily life. And everything about our daily life pushes you exactly opposite from that. So it's really interesting work, and he talks about it being perfect nesting and coherent. And it's basically a chance for your brain and your heart to start working together instead of working against each other. It's a really nice picture of it there. And a lot of people actually literally just use breathing to achieve that state. Just use breathing to achieve their Kundalini frequencies to reach that nice peak that we're looking for. And one of the reasons why a lot of people who experience Theraphi, when they do get into that deep state, they're planted enough to get into that moment where their pineal gland gets activated and makes them have some experiences. I think your daughter had some experience for the first time ever, but some people, the first time they ever get in there, because they're relatively calm to start with, go straight into a state where their mind just expands and they feel connected to everything. So you can imagine the implications of this information. It's not just that you're getting to a state of calm, but why we want to reach a state of calm, why everything looks the way it is, why all these other therapies that we hear about have such an impact on the human health in the body. And typically what's happening in the middle of that beautiful field that you're lying in the Theraphi is it's activating what's called the bioactive field. And a bioactive field is a field that actually is not only harmonic and coherent, but it's what he calls phase conjugating, where the two frequencies meet so perfectly in the middle that they support each other and create a ever-increasing force field that looks like that. And if any of you seen the movie Thrive, they talk about it a lot. The electromagnetic field of the heart. It's why everything in nature particularly has this shape. And the last thing I wanted to mention is in Dan Winter's work, where he refers to the Theraphi, talks about it being a syntropy or negative entropy system. So what that means is aging, disorder, things falling apart, we call entropy. We think it's the law of life and that's what's meant to happen. But in life, just as much as one tree might decay and die, another tree, which will be the seed, will be an impulsive force that sucks the nutrients to it so it will start to form in the first place. So that's the opposite of entropy. That's a negative entropy or syntropy effect. And what Dan Winter says is the secret behind that syntropy is this phase conjugating force field, which we see everywhere, which is likened unto yin and yang. And I'm just showing you pictures that you see in nature. It's just everywhere evidence. It's just proving it to us. If you cut open an apple, which is one of those tourists, you see a five-sided star. Have you ever done that before? If you take a five-sided star, the number 5 actually comes from the letter 5, because a five-sided star naturally has a golden ratio relation between the short part and the long part where the things cross over each other. And anytime you see nature starting to form a seed, you'll generally find the 5 or fruit, 5-sided figures related to that. And you'll find 5, the golden ratio or 5 coming in there, and this little creature starts from that size and makes this amazing force field, amazing form. And the research that they've done show that as the embryo is forming in the chicken, the blood moves like this first, and then slowly over time the heart forms around that force field. So interacting two phase coherent force fields that are making that beautiful donut shape are then only held in place in the material world by the heart. It's actually the movement of the force field happens first, and that's the perfect shape to enhance that. And also, just so you know, that the shell of an egg is filled with calcium, and our bones are filled with calcium, and calcium is one of the best materials, calcium carbonate specifically, for holding charge, for holding voltage, or holding electric fields, which is exactly what we want our body to do. So just being aware that the shell is evidence of this as well. And how seeds form, all related to this very specific field. And this is the flower of life, which is how you derive the golden ratio, and that's how your embryo splits into forming yourself when you're a baby. Extraordinary information, really, if you look at it. So Dan Winter, the inventor behind the Theraphi, says life is, in fact, self-organization that results from phase conjugate entropy. If I had read you the sentence in the beginning, you would have said, what did you say? But essentially what he's saying is it self-organizes, which is what all of life does, because these two frequencies interfere with each other in a harmonic that just continues to reinforce itself, creating all the shapes and structures that we see in life, which we call a bioactive field. And that is essentially why the Theraphi is so much of interest to me, is if we want to generate cities that nourish life, we want to generate water that nourishes life, we want to generate energy systems that nourish life, we want to generate everything from the cell phone frequency that's in your phone that nourishes life. We now have an equation that actually gives you those specific frequencies that can enable to nourish life. And as a starting point, Dan just put it into a Theraphi machine that people could start to see what it feels like to do it. So I hope that gives you a vague insight into it. I have another 2-hour version that's got all the physics of why this makes sense and fractal fields, but I've left that out for today because I really just wanted you to get a sense of it's fundamentally all about just the geometries and the frequencies of life and how essential it is that golden ratio is involved in all of those. Okay, so please do take your time to go and experience the Theraphi and see what it does for yourself. There's many different feedbacks about what it does for different people, and I'm more than happy to give you some feedback now.